looking at breakout players and flyer picks for your fantasy basketball draft. For the Western Conference this time, we did the Eastern Conference last time. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. We did a few hours ago, and which was something that was actually recorded a few days ago, the breakout and flyer picks for the Eastern Conference. Today, I'm going to do the Western Conference ones. And I was going to do this one later in the week, but I thought, why not? Just smash it out now, get that out there for people across the weekend. Western Conference breakout potential players, flyer type guys whose Yahoo ADP is all around 120 or lower, and in some cases a lot lower. These are guys that aren't necessarily going to work out. They just have an opportunity and how things can pan out in that direction. It doesn't really matter if you're playing a category league or a points league, or even if you're on ESPN or another provider. I'm just using Yahoo as the default rank number here, but these are just guys to keep an eye on, to have a crack at the end of drafts in terms of where their value might be and how it might work out. It's not specific really to any sort of format, so let's have a look. And starting with the Dallas Mavericks, this is especially pertinent for the beginning of the season when Porzingis is out. MAXI KLEBER and Dwight Powell. Dwight Powell is going to be ready to go for the start of the season, coming off his torn Achilles. While KLEBER is going to see increased rim protection duties and increased minutes. There's also Willie Cauley-Stein that I could throw in there for the beginning of the season. I don't know how the Mavericks are going to run things. There's Luka, obviously. There's Tim Hardaway. There's Dorian Finney-Smith. There's Josh Richardson. And then there's a big man slot. It's going to be Porzingis when he's healthy. But after that, do they go with two bigs? Do they start KLEBER? Do they start Powell? Where does Cauley-Stein fit in that rotation? So there are still some question marks there. But both KLEBER and Powell, especially early on in the season, have an opportunity to beat that ranking number and to return some pretty strong value, at least at the early portion of the season. For the Denver Nuggets, a few guys that I'm really interested in here. Number one is Facundo Campazzo, the guy who's ranked at 687th over on Yahoo at the moment. I don't know whether he's going to start or not. In fact, I'd probably doubt he is. But I'm pretty sure he's going to be in the rotation. And he could be that JJ Barea, DJ Augustin type player who plays 20 minutes and gets 4 to 5 assists. And that is so valuable at the back end of a fantasy draft. And if he does really translate and jumps ahead of Monty Morris and maybe pushes Gary Harris to the bench, which is a possibility.
Nice, Gary!
Campazzo's value is really interesting at the end of drafts. Now, Facu here is going to be a steals and assists sort of guy, but that has that value. Now, the Nuggets are playing in the preseason today, and they are going with Murray, Harris, Millsap, Jokic, and Michael Porter at small forward. No surprise there. But just keep an eye on Facu, see where he comes out. And then the other two guys are backup big men, Bol and Isaiah Hartenstein. You know that I love Hartenstein from a fantasy perspective, from what he did in Houston. And from what I hear from the Nuggets, he has a real chance to be the backup center immediately, with JaMychal Green and Paul Millsap playing the 4, and Green playing a little bit of the 5 as well. But Hartenstein probably expected to begin the season as the backup center. The Nuggets don't view Bol as a center. He is viewed more as a power forward or even a small forward because he's too weak to be a center. He's more of a rim-protecting power forward sort of a player. I don't expect Bol to necessarily be a 20-minute a night. We know, everyone knows, we love his blocks per minute. We love his ability. He's handling the ball. He's shooting amazing. We love all his per-minute stats, and we saw some big games in the bubble. We also saw him literally not play when the regular season resumed and when the playoffs kicked off. And they just don't view him, in my opinion, as a center. Maybe that changes throughout the season, and maybe that changes even at the beginning of the season. But at this point, they don't view him as a center. But these are absolutely guys to take a look at. And in deeper leagues, Hartenstein's a name that nobody's going to be touching. And I think he's got a chance to be that backup center pretty much immediately for the Nuggets team. And he's a high rebounding, good shot blocking, decent enough scorer, good percentage player, which does have quite a bit of fantasy utility. If we go to the Golden State Warriors, KEVON Looney, we're seeing today in the first preseason game, he's starting. And I've talked about Looney as I think he's a really good player, and injuries have held him back. The Warriors really believe in Looney. They believe in him as a solid center. He's not necessarily going to get big minutes, but the Warriors might run just 2 centers, and Marquise Chris might be on the outside looking in. If Looney's healthy, he's a better player than Chris, and the Warriors coaching staff trusts him significantly more. So I don't mind looking at him there. And then if I really wanted to get deep, Jordan Poole. I don't love that one. I don't think there's huge utility in that. But if he does take leaps forward, especially after he started playing point guard at the end of last season, he looked a lot better. He could maybe take over from Brad Wanamaker as that backup point guard. I doubt he's taking over from Kent Bazemore or Damian Lee in backup wing spots. But Jordan Poole, just again, more of a name to watch in a deeper league guy, because he did take some pretty significant steps forward towards the end of last season with his ability to handle the ball and be somewhat of a point guard after he was pretty much the worst rotation player in the entire NBA to begin the season. The next team we take a look at is the Rockets. I've got DeMarcus Cousins in here because his ADP or ranking's 139th. We saw him yesterday. He looked really good. He should not be getting outside the top 100 in drafts. You take him. Yes, Christian Wood was out of that game, as was PJ Tucker, but Cousins played 15 minutes and had 14 points and 2 steals and 2 blocks and 3 triples. He's an absolute monster in terms of per minute numbers. The injury risk is absolutely real, and we know that, and he's not going to be a 30-minute-a-night guy, but he is someone that you shouldn't let out of the top 100. Eric Gordon at 184. I have my doubts about Gordon. He's very much a guy that needs the ball in his hands, and he does very limited stuff in other categories. But if Harden goes, there is an opportunity for Gordo to take on more of a ball handling role and a higher usage role and a higher scoring and three-pointers role. I don't mind him as a late pick. And then we saw this guy start yesterday. JAE'SEAN TATE. He started because PJ Tucker was out, but if you're starting a preseason game, then you're obviously in line for some sort of rotation minutes. It could also be Bruno Caboclo, who had a pretty big game yesterday as well. But JAE'SEAN TATE for your deeper leagues, again, nobody's going to pay attention to this bloke who's at 661. Currently on the Yahoo ranks, he's a 25-year-old rookie that played in Australia last year. He's just an interesting name to be aware of because he does play in the NBA and he does play on this Rockets team who could be, they could have some depth issues. Let's just leave it at that. The Clippers. Interestingly, the Clippers went with Serge Ibaka as a starter yesterday, and they're going to continue to start Ibaka. I don't love that move for them, but Zubac still at 152 is going to be someone that's still worthwhile. I'm less interested in him as a flyer or a breakout guy now if they're going to start Ibaka. I thought they'd play 24 of Zubac and 26 of Ibaka, play them together for a couple of minutes, and they still may do that. But it wasn't, it didn't look great yesterday either in the preseason game. Patty Beverly at 170 can easily jump ahead of that. He was horrible last season, but he's a guy that can rebound well, can hit threes, can get steals. And if he's playing 28 a night, he'll beat that number comfortably, 170. And Marcus Morris at 178. I don't love his upside. He needs so much usage to even be a top 100 player. And he's just not going to get that on this squad with Lou Williams and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and even Luke Kennard. It's just going to be hard for him to get that role, but he's always, and you can have a look at him at the end of drafts for sure and see exactly how that rotation looks and how he plays. For the Lakers, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is ranked at 237th, and I think that KCP's upside is pretty limited, but his ability to hit threes, he can get some steals. He's definitely going to be better than 237, but let's talk about Talen Horton-Tucker, who is a guy that I loved last year as a second-round pick. He was never going to play, though. His statistical profile coming out of Iowa State was unbelievably good. And then you saw it yesterday. You saw why I like this guy. He can hit threes, he can handle the ball, he can pass, he can put up defensive stats. Now, still finding that role on this team is tough. He's probably, at this point, the 11th man. But on nights when Davis rests or LeBron rests and Horton-Tucker is in the rotation, he's ranked 453rd. I'm really interested to see what he can do. I think he could force his way into being a regular rotation piece for this team. And 2 years' time, wouldn't be surprised to see him playing as a real sixth man on this squad, ahead of guys like Kyle Kuzma. I think his upside's actually higher than Kuzma, if we're going to be honest, because his ability to do so many different things on a basketball court. Big into Horton-Tucker, and I think, and I've said that before, but I think you saw why in yesterday's game against the Clippers. For the Grizzlies, DeAnthony Melton, the wave pool at 163. I'm not sure how the Grizzlies are going to start games. I don't believe in Dylan Brooks. Everyone knows that. I think Melton's going to get minutes as a point guard at times, but mainly as a backup wing, and his ability to generate steals is huge, and that could push him into the top 150 just off the back of that one category. They extended him as a restricted free agent this offseason. They do believe in him. He's never going to be, at least this season, a 30-minute-a-night player, but he's an interesting last-round flyer. And if you want to go real deep, it is the big fella, Desmond Bane, ranked 673rd. Loved Bane. I thought so many teams made mistakes in passing up on him in the draft. I think within 2 weeks, he could be a better player than Dylan Brooks. And I don't think that's being hyperbolic. He is a fantastic scorer. He can pass. He's super strong as well. The shooting is great from BANE. I think it'd be an awesome fit next to Ja Morant. It might take a little bit of time, but Desmond BANE, someone I'm really, really excited about. And if Taylor Jenkins is going to be fair income about it, he's got to give him that opportunity in the rotation ahead of Grayson Allen, ahead of, not ahead of Brooks at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him move into this rotation. It won't happen immediately, but he's absolutely just a name to keep an eye on. For the Timberwolves, they're starting an interesting starting lineup today, and Jake Layman starting at power forward, and Josh Okogie's at the 3. Malik Beasley's at the 2. Anthony Edwards is off the bench. Ricky Rubio's off the bench as well. I've got JUANCHO Hernan-Gomez and RONDAE Hollis-Jefferson, who I thought would battle for the power forward position here. I could throw Jake Layman in there, but I don't really care about him from a fantasy perspective. If RONDAE is the guy that plays 30 minutes, then he'll be a draftable player. If JUANCHO plays 30, I'm not really sure he's a draftable guy, but the 30 minutes are intriguing. They're at least flyer guys to look at. And then Jarrett Culver, let's see, can he take any sort of step forward? He was trash last year. I would like to see them put him instead of Okogie and develop him there, but there is so many bodies in that backcourt with Okogie, with Culver, Rubio, Russell, Beasley, Edwards, so many names in that 1, 2, 3 rotation for the Wolves. It is going to be hard. And again, you can throw Layman onto this list as well, who is starting today's game for the Wolves. But really hard, I think, with that sort of weird depth of bad players, which is how I view most of these guys. They're not great, but they're all in the mix to take playing time off each other. It's going to be hard to see any of them take significantly huge steps forward, but they are absolutely still... There are still players who are in the mix as options in that area. I really want to see how this all works and how... Look, they're not going to just kill Anthony Edwards' minutes, although they did it to Culver last year because he wasn't very good. And maybe they do. Maybe they just say Edwards isn't ready. He'll play 22 a night, and then Culver and Okogie will take that playing time. But how they work out that rotation at the 2, 3, 4 and the 1, a lot of question marks for Ryan Saunders. So that could give rise to definitely some streaming options there. But if not streaming options, some guys who establish themselves in larger roles than we may have initially thought. And that's always a scenario that you want to pay attention to in fantasy. Next up, we look at the Pelicans. This is a tough one to me. Jackson Hayes is just going to play those minutes behind Steven Adams. So he's not going to get big run. Nikola Melli is going to play behind Zion. Maybe he plays next to Zion somewhat, but not a great option. Alexander Walker and Kyra Lewis. It's just hard for them to get enough playing time with Eric Bledsoe, JJ Redick, Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball. There's just not enough playing time for those guys at this point. So I've got Redick and Hart there. Redick's at 183. Hart's at 231. I think they beat those numbers. And there'll be times when they become standard league relevant. It won't be all of the time. And Redick's probably the guy I'm more interested in out of that combination if I am taking a flyer there. If they do decide to, say, bring Eric Bledsoe off the bench, I doubt they will, but that remains to be seen. And Redick's got that ability to be a high percentage 3-point gunner, which has some value in fantasy for sure. Next up, it is the Thunder. There's guys all over the place for this team. They're, in fact, starting Isaiah Roby and the Moose Mike Muscala today. But let's start with Darius Bazley, who's at 158. I think he can be a top 100 player. He's not playing today in that preseason game. I love Bazley at 158. And then there's Lou Dort at 215.
Bort? Oh, come on, Bort?
Mommy, buy me a license plate!
No, come along, Bort.
Are you talking to me?
No, my son is also named Bort.
Yes, Dort is at 215. His shooting percentages are a massive worry. He did have that one big game in the playoffs, but teams will figure that out. He won't have that sort of scoring ability and that sort of space always given to him. But for steals and for minutes, it's going to be useful for Dort. And then you've got Pokusevski. I don't think that Trevor Ariza is going to play for this team at all. I think you'll get Bazley starting, but at some point, Pokusevski is going to be in the rotation, and his fantasy skill set, ranked at 680th on Yahoo, gives rise to some pretty intriguing upside. I don't think he's a guy that I'm taking in the last round, but I'm also not against it. In a 16-teamer, yeah, absolutely I'm drafting Pokusevski. In a 14, I'm not sure. The other one is rookie Teo Maledon. The Thunder are starting MC Hamidou Diallo, which is what I thought they would do. I don't like it, but they are starting Diallo next to Shea in that backcourt. But I think eventually Maledon's going to have the opportunity to get rotation minutes. They've got George Hill also starting. I think Maledon's going to get some rotation minutes when Hill is bought out or sent somewhere else. and his ability to generate assists is something that's quite useful, and he can be a solid 3-point shooter. So these are more just flyer types, and Bazley's clearly the number one, then Dort, then Pokusevski, but MELTON is just one for those deeper formats. For the Suns, Cameron Johnson and Cameron Payne. Johnson at 166, I believe Jay Crowder will be the starter for the Suns, but that doesn't mean that Johnson can't play 25 to 28 minutes and grab you some boards and bang in some threes and do that at high efficiency. We saw some pretty strong numbers from him in the bubble, but this team is quite different. But I think Johnson as a late round flyer, especially if you are light on threes and you want to grab some, he could hit 2.5 to 3 a game. Yeah, I think pretty easily. And then Campaign was absolutely unbelievable in the bubble. Now he's not going to play that well in the full regular season, shooting 50% from 3. But as a scoring, assists, and 3 points made boost stream type option, Payne's in play there. I think he's going to be that backup point guard. Javon Carter will be more of that backup too. Payne, and there's going to be games that Chris Paul sits. We know he's going to miss games. There's almost no getting around that fact. Even if Chris Paul claims that his new diet means that he's not getting injured anymore, he will probably get hurt at some point. That's the odds on it. And then Payne's going to have some real utility, and he's at 398 on Yahoo at the moment. For the Blazers, Derek Jones Jr., terrible shooter, but in that first preseason game, he banged in threes, and I don't think missed a single field goal in that game. So that was impressive. He's a steal and a blocks player. That is, that's where his bread and butter is. But he's going to start. He's going to hit some threes. If he does hit some threes, there is value in him as a last round pick. And same with Gaz Trent.
Nice, Gary!
Now Trent's limited in terms of he gets some steals, but it's mainly I hit threes and I score. And if how that opportunity is going to go with McCollum and Lillard and Mallow and Covington and Jones and all these guys in the mix for minutes, Trent's probably going to have his upside capped somewhat. But could he force his way into more minutes ahead of these guys? For sure. You could also throw Mallow into this list as well, who was unbelievably good in that preseason game. He can do this at times. He is inconsistent though. But Gary Trent and Derek Jones are some interesting flyers here for the Blazers. For the Kings, Tyrese Halliburton at 149. Buddy Hield was really good in the preseason game on Friday. He scored. He didn't do anything else. And I thought Halliburton towards the end of that game really started to come on. And I think he's the better fit next to De'Aaron Fox. Even if he's a 24-minute starter and Hield plays 28 off the bench, I think Halliburton's the better fit there. And yeah, as all rookies are going to be in trouble here because they didn't have summer league, they had no camp. Everyone's going to be behind the 8 ball. LaMelo Ball's coming off the bench. Anthony Edwards is coming off the bench. James Wiseman's going to come off the bench. It's going to be hard for these guys to get starting jobs initially. But if you've got some time to invest, and Halliburton's probably more of a 16 or 14 team league guy at this point, but his ability to get steals and assists and hit some threes has some fantasy value. Nemanja Bjelica, 234th ranked player. The minutes will be hard, but we know that Marvin Bagley isn't exactly a picture of health. And if Bjelica gets minutes over Bagley because he's hurt, then he does become an option. He's probably more of a deeper league guy though. And he looked pretty terrible in that Kings game against the Blazers on Friday. For the Spurs, I really like Keldon Johnson at number 189. I don't know what sort of lineup the Spurs are going to run. There are a lot of question marks there. Do they go with Poeltl and Aldridge? Do they go what they've been claiming they're going to do and go 4 out with a center or even 5 out with LaMarcus Aldridge and play fast and play the young guys? I think they should do that. I don't think they should be valuing Trey Lyles, but they could put Trey Lyles in there. They could start with nonsense like Lonnie Walker, although people like Lonnie Walker. I don't think he's all that good, but he could get minutes there. But Keldon at 189, I love him as a late pick. I think there's real value in him. You could also say Poeltl at 143. If he does start and play 24 minutes, which I think is a stretch, but if he does get those 24 minutes, he obliterates that number. I've got no doubt about that. I just don't know how they're going to run that rotation, and there are question marks about that with Big Yak there, but I am interested to see how that all plays out, and he could be an option. But Keldon Johnson, he won't shoot the 50% that he did in the bubble, which was great, but he's showed an ability to score, to finish, to shoot, and to play really good defense, and all that stuff is important for fantasy value. And then the Utah Jazz. Is Jordan Clarkson a breakout? Not really, but he is a flyer. 186 at the end of the bench. If Conley misses time, which the Jazz have talked about, he'll get some extra usage. Now, he's inconsistent, Jordy Clarkson for sure, and he's better in a points league than a categories league, but at 186, he's definitely better than that. And as a scoring option off your bench who hits some threes, who does it with a really high free throw percentage, he's a top 150 guy who you can get in that last round in nearly every draft. I don't think the upside is huge, but it could boost up if Mitchell does get hurt at all, or if Conley gets hurt and rests. I think Royce O'Neal at 207 is also someone that we should look at, a guy that probably should be, well, he should be a top 200 guy pretty comfortably. He was 177th last year, so they got him outside the top 200. Is his upside all that high? Probably not, but steals, rebounded the ball pretty well. His three-point shooting has come along at a solid rate. I think that O'Neal's worth a look. And then if we go right down, Mia One, a couple of Jazz people that I've spoken to, including David Locke, really big on One. They think that he's going to be a rotation piece. His numbers from last year won't give you a huge amount of confidence, and this is for very, very deep leagues. But coming in as a backup wing sort of player, you play Ingles as your backup point guard, so to speak, and then Clarkson and One coming off the bench. They really love what One can do, and he's going to get first crack ahead of guys like Elijah Hughes, and probably even ahead of a guy like Shaq Harrison, who they just signed.
Big Shaq.
Although maybe Harrison gets that role, but One is a name that literally no one's going to be talking about, who the Jazz envisage as a rotation piece and a guy that can come in and play some strong defense and be a solid enough offensive contributor. So they're my 15 Western Conference breakout flyer types. We've got a mock draft coming tomorrow for a points league, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yeah, we're doing a points league mock draft tomorrow. We're doing some more ADP battles with Alex Reclean of RotoWire and Jared Johnson of RotoWorld. They're coming on to do some ADP battles. We've got a 14-team head-to-head mock draft. We've got a 20-team head-to-head mock draft. We've got another 12-team head-to-head mock draft to finish out the week as well. Lots of great stuff coming. We're going to have another live AMA question and answer show, so lots of great stuff happening. Of course, there's the Discord, there's Basketball Monster. You can follow me on Twitter, there's Instagram. And I dropped today the schedule of what I'm going to do during the season as well. I'm also going to be doing some short videos for Al Zeidenfeld, Al Smizzle, as you might know him, on YouTube, just doing some small 10, 11-minute DraftKings preview videos for Al too. So we'll be doing those over there, so you can check me out on his channel too. Lots of stuff going on. Guys, I'm wrapping it up. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.